Hi, everyone, and welcome to the July Coffee and CEU events brought to you by the DBA SIG. My name is Annie Escalante, and I'm one of the board members for the SIG. Thank you so much for attending, for registering, and for coming and spending an hour with us during your Saturday. We really do appreciate it. This event is going to be presented by Abby Twyman, and it's going to be a really exciting and very inspirational presentation. So I'm very happy for all of you to be here. Quickly, some housekeeping. We still have our DBA fundraiser going on. You're able to get really fun swag, such as this shirt, such as this really cool mug. And if you check out the website, broadcastbehavior.com, you'll be able to see all the other really fun things that we have there. And all proceeds for the nonprofit go straight to the Dissemination of Behavior Analysis SIG grant, which will be live and up and running in the fall. So keep your eye out on that. It's a really great cause, and we would love to help and support you with your dissemination goals and dreams. Something else on a more personal note, this is my final Coffee and CEU event as a host. We've been doing this for the past 2.5 years or so, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and I'm so excited to pass the baton off to the new Coffee and CEU host, which will be Gloria Yang. We've been working behind the scenes together to set these events up, so I am so happy to see how her perspective will be influenced on these events. So keep an eye out for July. I believe she's going to be starting in July of 2020. Alrighty, so without further ado, Abby, take it away.
All right, thanks, Annie. Well, I am super excited to be here, and it's so good to see quite a few faces and names of people that I know and have had connections with throughout my career. So this is really kind of fun. For any of you who don't know me or don't know kind of who I am or my story, my name is Abby Twyman. I am a board certified behavior analyst, and I was in practice I was certified in 2009 and was in practice until 2016, when then my family and I moved to Alaska to help care for family and take a bit of a sabbatical from clinical practice. And kind of one of my big goals moving up here was to kind of reconsider and reconceptualize who I want to be as a behavioral scientist, and kind of refocus and recenter my life. So I'm super excited for this presentation because we are the organization that I run, Action for a Peaceful World. We're taking a pivot so if you guys have seen what we've been doing in the past, we're taking a pivot from what we were doing to something that is much more in alignment with our values, and something that I believe is going to help us as a field, but more importantly, as a world, move forward. So, so I'm super excited to be able to be here. What I would like to invite you all to do before we get started, and kind of as we're coming into this space and getting ready to kind of think a little bit more deeply about what we do as behavioral scientists, who we are as humans, and what we are going to choose to do with this moment. I want you to think about, or I want you to be thinking about, as I'm talking and as I'm kind of presenting the, the core of what I'm going to talk about today, and then we'll open it up into discussion. But what I want you to be thinking about is this question: what am I willing to do? And that is something that I've been, just personally considering over the course of the past 3.5 years. Is specifically that question, like, what, in the face of this adversity, what am I willing to do to make a change or make a difference? So as you find a comfortable spot where you can just sit and relax and take a deep breath in and get ourselves centered. Let me just pull this up. Okay. So over the past 4 months, our world has been rocked to its core. The wave of justice warriors and this social justice movement rising to the surface has been very inspiring to many, including myself. This that I'm doing here and the work that we're doing and the pivot that we're making is really, to me, a call to action to all the beautiful humans out there who are ready to stand up and speak up and take action to create a more peaceful world for themselves and their families and their communities and all those who rely on Mother Earth for survival each day. While there has been undeniably some progress over the past 520 years since the beginning of colonialism, there is so much pain and suffering that has been caused as a result of that so-called progress. And as we're here, we're coming together and looking out into the wider world, and the movement that is kind of this wave of movement that's coming in this time in history, we know that something needs to change. We know that something needs to be done differently, but it's really unclear what that is or what that should really look like. What kind of, in observable behavioral terms, actionable steps, what that really looks like. So kind of my thesis really is that as a species, as humankind, as inhabitants of this planet, in order for us to truly affect meaningful change and sustainable change, we must all come together and create a plan that is based on our shared values. And to do that, kind of the key phrase that kept coming up to me as I was thinking about what am I going to do? What am I willing to do? What is going to be the next right action? The phrase collective action kept coming back to me, that we must come together as a collective with a shared set of values to continue to take action moving forward. So some of you who know me know that I'm kind of, no matter what I'm doing in the here and now and whatever, work activity that I'm doing, my brain is always thinking kind of like bigger picture and inspiration and empowerment and how can we get things moving. And, I'm like the hype girl. I want things to get moving. I want people to get excited and elevated and, really start to take action. So one of the things that I've been over the past couple of years as we've been in Alaska, I've gone through some things personally that have, really on a personal level rocked me to the core and kind of changed my whole perspective on life and who I am and who I want to be. And one of the things that kind of helped me stay motivated and stay focused as I was going through all of this was music. So music to me is something that, lyrics and beats and connections and dance really kind of just soothes my soul. And so as I was going through my own personal struggles and trying to stay focused on what mattered most, there were a couple Eminem songs that really from his recovery album that got me like super motivated. And when I was having a down moment, I could put this, I had 4 specific songs in a specific order that would just like get me feeling like, okay, I can handle this. I can do whatever. So I am excited to debut this. I'm this little mashup that I put together that's based on some Eminem songs and kind of using my creativity and creative writing to create a kind of an inspirational call to action song that can, that might help you as you're thinking about, what you're willing to do and the actions that you're willing to take. So we'll see how this works. I have a drum, and we'll see if there's a drum line, so I'm not much of a performer, but here it goes. I'll stop talking down myself. We're going through changes. Don't know what we're gonna do. We just keep on going through changes. But we're not afraid to take a stand. Everybody, come take our hands. We'll walk this world together through the storm, whatever weather, cold or warm, just letting you know that you're not alone. Holler if you feel like you've been down the same road. Throw dirt on us and grow a wildflower. Some say fuck the world, it'll never change, yeah. Yeah, we've seen some shit, but now it's time to act, yo. Had our knees on necks, can't say we didn't know though. We're mourning George and too many others tried to play the game, but they broke the rules. That's why our bars are full of broken bottles and our nightstands are full of open Bibles. We think about more than we forget. It's time to use our fire, push for change and make them sweat. We know it's a little too late to say that we're sorry now. We kicked you when you were down, and our inaction left scars. We showed you nothing but hate. We sat in silence and watched, but our time is out now. No more excuses. It's time for action. We zero in on our target like a marksman, and the target is hate. We fill your cup up, honor you and celebrate. Black Lives Matter, just transition, humanists, what will we do? Go get your crew, make a plan, and let's start to move. Together we are strong enough to make change, and for good to unite the masses and put this world back together with glue. Now guess what? Hey, time is up. Hey, we protest with our pods, wielding our voices too. We're in your ear, we're in your face, we're all up in your psyche too. Who are we? Humans, beautiful humans. So I've been thinking a lot about, what's the next right action? What are we willing to do? What's the context in which we're acting? And that should be giving us the momentum, the motivation, the inspiration, the empowerment, whatever it is. Like, what is it that should be giving us this push forward? And as behavioral scientists, we look to, or we should be looking to the data to provide us with a clear picture of the scope and the depth of the challenges that we're having. Many people will make the claim that, our system's broken and we've got to do something, change it, we've got to make changes. But when you turn to the data and you look at the data and you look at trends over time, it's clear to us, those of us in this world who have experience analyzing data, and that's just our lifeblood, if you will, that, we look at the data, and even though we have the data that shows, our system is broken, nothing is changing, or the changes have been very minimal, we can kind of make the assumption that our actions, whatever they have been, however they have been chosen, have not been effective at at creating change and bringing us to a point where we can all survive and thrive as humans. So I live in Alaska, and as an example of our chronic issues that our country is facing, and kind of the, the depth of the challenges that we face and that we kind of are called to do something about in this moment of history, I wanted to share some data from Alaska with you. Every year, the state of Alaska, since 2008, has put out a scorecard that shows for the mental health trust, the recipients of those benefits, they look at kind of what the core challenges are and present some data. So in that scorecard in 2019, it showed that 5.9% of adults reported contemplating suicide. 23.5% of adults engaged in heavy or binge drinking. 18.1% of those over the age of 12, repeat that again, 12 years old, 18% used illicit drugs. 36% of teens reported being depressed. Almost 13% of the population didn't have health insurance. 44% of those who were incarcerated had a mental illness or disability. 43.5% of arrests involved drugs or alcohol. 6% of children had a serious emotional disturbance, and 20.5% of those adults had a diagnosed mental illness. And when I charted these data on the standard acceleration chart, it was, I mean, just like so clear, like without a doubt, there has been no socially significant improvement, right? So it's like just there's some variability, but it's been fairly stable over the past 12 years. So that, red flags all over the place. There's something that needs to change, but we're not really sure what. So our communities here in Alaska aren't much different than those across the world. Except for the fact that we rank in the bottom, or kind of the worst, in a lot of these categories, most specifically suicide, which is actually on the rise. So what these data tell me is that our people are suffering, and it's time that we take a serious look at those root causes and come together. Okay. So, we need to come together and look at the root causes and really develop a plan to effectively and efficiently address those issues. The work that I've done in the community over the past couple years, the pattern, just the behavioral pattern that I've noticed, the observations that I've made, is that there are a lot of people with a lot of passion, and they care about their communities and they care about their people, but they don't know what to do. So many people go through these strategic planning processes and have these visions and goals, and then they go onto a shelf, and then every meeting, board meeting is filled with, like inaction and inadequacy, and not, just it's that lack of training and lack of follow through and accountability. So it's, the issues that we're facing are super pervasive. And one of the things that I've learned, or that I feel like I've kind of finally come to realize, is that as a behavioral scientist, I've always looked at the individual and those observable, measurable behaviors. But then when we look at kind of the world and global politics and change, there's that big disconnect where we're looking at data and statistics, but kind of divorced from the individual and the person and really from humanity. So my proposition, my theory, is that we really need to start by telling our stories, being more open, being more honest, being more willing to share our stories and really listen to the stories of others, if anything, over the past month, that has been one of the things that I've, been taking an active steps towards, is really like stop talking and listen to what others have to say. And what I've seen is that there's so much wisdom, so many things that I thought I knew. I had a good idea of what was going on. I didn't really know, and I didn't have, and by sitting back and listening and being open to the wisdom that's being shared from, people outside of my kind of normal sphere, there's so much data that we can glean from those stories. And when we stop and we listen and we're taking into consideration the human aspect of it, I believe that we'll get better data, more meaningful data that can help inform our plans. And we can, if we come together and we're telling our stories and we're looking at kind of what really is, and not sugarcoating it, not catastrophizing it, but just, what are the data telling us, we can create a shared plan that will be our impetus for action. And if we're taking actions, those will be founded in the service of justice. And this idea of radical justice or radical transformation or transformational justice, once we have that throughout the world, I truly believe that we will experience true peace. So when we launched AFAPWA, Action for a Peaceful World, back in late 2019, our goal was to provide courses to behavioral scientists to overcome challenges associated with burnout. That's kind of what I had, the way that I conceptualized what I was going through in my professional work, and why I need, why kind of moving to Alaska and going to help family and taking a sabbatical was so drawing to me. I had read all these books and I had done all this personal work. I found it, that I found those extremely helpful. So I wanted to create these courses that would, help others, who had struggled or were struggling with the same things that I had struggled with, and using a blend of storytelling and hands-on experiences to really send those messages home. So the original intention was for the classes to be super interactive rather than just me talking at people. But I found myself falling back into old habits, and I've been, doing a lot of work on how to, remain centered and focused in the moment and be present in my life and notice when those ineffective patterns of behavior reemerging, and realign with my values and pivot towards what matters. It quickly became clear that I didn't know, like, what, the original idea and what was actually taking place wasn't completely in alignment. So I knew I had to do something different, but it was like, not really sure what that looked like yet. And then COVID-19 hit in March. And it was, that sense of just like being disorganized, you get these external influences that evoke, these internal processes. And I was, just immediately in that, like, I'm disorganized, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm not really sure kind of where I'm going, I feel like I'm starting to veer off track. So, the skills that I've learned is that when that starts to happen, I need to pause, like take a pause, take a time out, get recentered, get refocused. And this pandemic is something that we've never dealt with. I felt this deep concern for myself and my family and my community. And I was thinking about, like, oh my God, just projecting out, this is what my brain does. My brain just goes, all, far out into the future, just thinking about the economic devastation that this global pandemic was, just was absolutely positively going to I can just foresee this happening. That's my prediction, at least. And I didn't really know what the next right action, so I just kind of pumped the brakes. And so it's kind of things slowed down in May or March and April, and then in May, George Floyd was murdered on Memorial Day, and yet another example of systemic racism for which our Black and brown brothers and sisters have continued to pay the price for over 500 years. And that event, followed by the, that long overdue uprising of anti-racist activism, just caused me to just slam on the brakes and come to a full stop. Because really, if there's ever a moment in history in which to take action. This was literally it. I can't think of any more perfect time at, the confluence of all these variables. Like this 2020, this moment is in history is the time to do something. And so I stopped. But in my past, in my history, like that, these big overwhelming things, these big overwhelming emotions, like that historically, when those would come into my life, my coping skills weren't very well developed. And so I just, I had this vexing pattern of behavior of, stressful event, shut down, cry, hide, run away, right? So just the flee. I'm not going to fight it. I'm either going to hide or I'm going to run away. But I've done a lot of work to realize that it's like, okay, well, that's maladaptive. That's not effective. That's not living in service with my values. And so I need to do something different. So at that moment in time, I decided to push in. And so over the next couple of weeks, I joined groups and I actively listened. I reflectively listened. I shared what I was learning with others. I began really considering what the next right action was. And what really came to me was that the courses and lessons that I had originally designed them were no longer a fit for the context, nor were they completely in line with our original vision. But our mission is the same. So we decided to change, and kind of the goal is to move us from courses and lessons, which were, they were really well received, and, people, kind of the responses were such that people were getting a lot of benefit from the classes on a personal level, but it wasn't kind of that next level that I really want to take. So on July 11th, in 2 weeks, we're going to restart our weekly sessions, but rather than courses and lessons where I'm like teaching something, it's going to be a place where we can come together. I'm calling them action circles. We're going to where we can come together. We can work collaboratively to address our shared concerns, and kind of bring, rather than just kind of narrow focus of kind of a target audience of behaviorists, I want to kind of reconceptualize our target audience to change catalysts. So whoever that is, behaviorists, you're in another movement, I want to kind of bring people in and make and kind of bring together this group where we can really start to have those conversations and create those plans and analyze the data in a way that makes sense from a behavior analytic standpoint, but also from a humanist standpoint, which is kind of where my personal rebranding has been as a humanistic behavioral scientist, to kind of bring in those two, kind of the humanist aspect and then the behavioral scientist aspect, that I feel is that missing component. So our action circles, I'm really excited for this new development. I've participated in a couple groups over the past couple weeks, where it's more of a pod of people, and we are coming together and coming into a circle, coming into this space, getting centered, sharing words of inspiration that we've either read and wanted to share, or we've written and we wanted to share, engaging in some reflective journaling, so we can kind of really practice the skills of social advocacy in an environment that is conducive to behavior change. And my vision is that we have this group of people, this pod of people who can work together, come together, share their stories, but then go out into their respective communities and affect change, but in a more effective and meaningful way. So I'm really like the new website, it's collectiveaction.world, and it's that's where you can get registered. And I've written an article kind of based on this work to share and create create that space. Um, and so I want to bring us all together. But what I want to do now, we have like 25 minutes left. I want to kind of bring us back to this space that we're in. We're having coffee, and we're talking about behavioral science, and we're talking about taking action and changing the world and doing something different. We know that there's something different that needs to be done. And yes, burnout. I mean, that term burnout, one of the things that I consumed the other day was this idea, kind of a shift from the idea of burnout to moral injury. And the idea of moral injury is that we kind of, we come into this world, or we go into our personal environments, and we have a set of values and we have a set of morals to which we have, we've been trained, and those have been uplifted in us, and we have, we embody these morals and values. And then we go out into the, the real world, in which we are supposed to be, like those values and morals are supposed to be guiding our actions. And then we step into this world in which aversive contingencies and counter control, and all of these things that we know are like, yeah, that is an application of the science of behavior and learning, but it's, number one, it's, there's so many deleterious effects of that, and there's, it marginalizes people, and so it's, we know that there's something different that needs to happen, and something we need to shift and change. And I don't know, I don't have the answers. And I don't know that any of us do, but we have a strong set of ideals, and we have a science behind us. And like I said, I believe that this moment is in history is when we can, and when we should, and when we can come together and do something different. So I'd like to share something. I'm going to share just a quick story about ABBA from 2016. So 4 years ago, I went to ABBA. I attended a talk that was done by a neuroscientist that had brought together a group of people from around the world, and they created, based on some technology, like using brain waves and robotics, they actually were able to create a robotic legs for a person that at the Soccer World Cup, they were able to use their brain waves, just thinking about moving and kicking the ball, to control these robotic legs. It was like the most amazing talk that I've ever been to at ABBA. And I was just like, whoa, the power, to me, it was like the power of people coming together from all different areas and collaborating and coming up with a solution that was like phenomenal. And it was like, it was amazing that they were able to apply this technology and get a human being who had been paralyzed, his soccer player was able to, think about walking and kicking this ball and kick the opening kick. But not only was that like this, like, whoa, that's so cool. The like extra thing that they found was that the paralyzed people who had participated in this study actually began to recover motor and sensory function. And for anybody who has, worked with people who are paraplegic or, lost sensory or motor function, historically we've thought of that as like, that's a death sentence, or not a death sentence, but it's like there's no recovery. Never ever will you ever like be able to walk or feel again. And this like collaborative effort like proved that that was bullshit. Like, it was like, oh, and not like people were doing something wrong or like didn't have faith in people who were paralyzed. It was just like the science didn't support recovery. But then we had this cool like group of people that came together from all over and like brought their, mind melded, and were able to do something that was like nobody thought was possible. And so that's kind of my impetus and my what I, I really think like us coming together and bringing, joining other movements is really where it's at and where we need to kind of pivot towards. But this isn't a new idea. I didn't come up with this idea of like behaviorists should join other social movements if we have any hope of producing positive change. This is something that the people in our field, the thought leaders and the researchers and the like these are things that people have been thinking about and working on for years, but there's not been the momentum, there's not been this coalescence of forces. But I do want to share with you, just as like a last piece, and then we can go into just, we can have some discussion. But I want to share with you all the editorial, just a snippet from the editorial of the first edition of the Behaviorists for Social Action Journal, which was published back in 1978. Joe Morrow was the first editor of the journal. And it just like, it struck me that maybe there are a lot of people out there who haven't heard these words. And I really think that he succinctly kind of pointed to what the problem is and what the potential solution is. So I'll just share this passage. And so this is just the introduction to this journal and why behaviorists should be taking social action. So the first concern has to do with the ethical examination of our field, behaviorism, and of ourselves and colleagues as behaviorists. In particular, behaviorism must look at itself and ask some questions pertaining to our role in the social political process that exists in this country. I believe the founders of BFSA are convinced that we are not, nor can we be, neutral parties in this process. To attempt neutrality in the face of rampant injustice is rarely a form of support for injustice. As the circulated recruitment letter stated, we are convinced we must become active participants in the struggle against injustice. Thus, our first concern is to involve behaviorism, the science of behavior, in that struggle. In a very real sense, this means politicizing our field. However, that is not a bad thing, but rather something positive. It does not mean, as some might argue, a displacement of the truth for political ends. On the contrary, it means the preeminence of truth. The sacrificing of truth is necessary only for those who would exploit others. Not those who would overturn exploitation. One need only look at the scientific track record to determine where interests are served by the truth and falsity. On the side of truth, war results from a set of environmental contingencies, not some innate need for aggression. Racial differences in IQ test scores are the product of different socioeconomic and cultural contingencies. Based in large measure on Cyril Burr's faked data, England undertook public policy to deprive working classes of certain opportunities provided for other classes. Business firms, even those for which behaviorists work, subordinate concern for people to a concern for profit. And a set of contingencies of reinforcement called capitalism produces racism, sexism, poverty, war, and a great many other undesirable effects. In our writings about the ills of society, we have essentially closed our eyes to the most obvious first step of all, the replacement of the contingencies of capitalism. We have thereby separated ourselves from every serious and successful movement for social change. How can we expect to obtain deserved credibility for the science of behavior when we give no credibility to the most obvious social fact of this century? We have much to offer these movements. They have many central unanswered questions that a science of behavior could provide. Much available evidence suggests that the replacement of a capitalist ruling class does not in itself result in the inexorable development of collective thinking in society. Revolutionaries with the best of intentions may find these intentions to be of limited value when faced with the reality of changing old ways of thinking and behaving. just as revolutionaries in the other countries have had to turn to engineers to design and build dams and physicians to design public health programs, it is just possible they will have to turn to a science of behavior to build a non-exploitative society. So, yeah, I will definitely, I'll drop the link in here. So I like this, to me, I read this and I was like, hell yeah, like let's get her, like come on, let's come together and like let's go. And you know, it's just interesting because we have a history of people within our field, once you understand the science of behavior and learning and why we do the things that we do, and then you can look around and see like all of these ineffective things happening in our world, it makes you really want to like stand up and do something. But we don't know what to do. There's a lot of people with a lot of great ideas, and I think it's this time in history where we need to come together and be that supportive influence to help the people who have been kind of the victims of our unjust and corrupted system to actually fulfill the American dream that we're supposed to be fighting for. So with that, I will stop and open it up, and I'll peek through the comments and questions. Yeah. So thank you guys for.
Great. So if anyone has any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to turn on your mic, vocally speak. You can also use the chat box to textually communicate with us. Thank you so much for coming today. We really do appreciate it. And yes, wonderful. So if anyone has any comments, please say them out loud. We want to hear your voices on this lovely Saturday morning. And just before guys leave, if you don't have questions, for those who did register, I will be sending out an email with the recording link. So if you want to review the talk, you're more than welcome to do so. I'll also send out an email with the Google survey. In order to get the CEU certificate, you would have to fill out the Google survey. So that should be sent out shortly, probably towards the end of the day. I have to take my computer to get it fixed, unfortunately. So I have some tech issues on my end. But please expect that email in your email box shortly. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, please say them out loud. I know, Abby, that someone had asked for that journal article title so they can look it up. If you have that at the ready, or if you want to send it via email, and I can put that as part of the resources that I send out along with the recording link email, that would be fantastic.
That the article, so if you search behaviors for social action and then click on the link to their article archive, it is the first, it's the first article in the first edition. And like Selena said, I just pop through those articles, and the first one's actually really hard to read. I transcribed it, but there's so much amazing stuff in there.
Perfect. Alrighty, I'll get the link for the attendees. Okay.
Hey, Abby, I was actually going to ask you, did you check out the ABAI, the Social Cultural Conference yet, and look at the program details? Because I feel like that's maybe where you can recruit some people for your group, because they are, like, I'm just thinking of Shala Alai Rosales, or I think it's Shala Rosales now. So, like, she would be very much into, like, she has a social justice lab at UNT. So I'm just trying to think of like how to garner like exactly the vision that you have with people that are going to reinforce that.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I haven't looked at the program yet. I saw that it's happening. But yeah, I definitely will connect with Shala on that.
Yeah, that's where I'm like, I always look at the program books and the details and the speakers and the topics, and then find out who's doing what already in the field. So if anybody else is still on this and listens to this, that's what you should do, is check out that particular one. Thank you, Abby.
Abby, we have someone in the chat, Glendon, who is asking, what are new techniques that you guys are using in the field in your various countries?
So that's a broad question for me, but so in my own personal work, I'm a special education teacher, but in terms of global change, I don't have the answers about like what are the strategies to affect change. One of the things that I've been focused on lately is reading and listening outside of our field. There's behavior analysts are moving into this social action, social justice world. But one group of people that has been doing this a lot is social workers. Global social workers have been kind of, working in this area. And while, we might not completely agree with their strategies and tactics for producing change, I think that is a group of people with whom we could have a powerful collaboration with.
Yeah, completely and totally agree. Having a multidisciplinary approach to social justice concerns would be beneficial, since everyone has a different type of perspective and comes from a different context. That would make the most sense.
Yeah. And I live up in Alaska, and, the Alaska Native community is large and strong. And there is the Just Transition movement that is more of a global movement, but Just Transition Alaska. The group of young Indigenous leaders is they're so inspiring, and the work that they're doing to kind of bring traditional cultural values in line with our new technology and new way as what has progressed. It's pretty phenomenal. So I'm excited to kind of bring in those groups as well.
So we have a comment from Alex in the chat. I think many people have constructive ideals and the will to do something about them. The tricky part seems to be coordinating action towards a coherent vision. I would like to help people conceptualize their visions and apply them to reality, and to help them communicate with each other across paradigms. However, equipping people with concepts requires specific examples and stories related to the contexts people are familiar with. That's something I'll need help with. Are there any groups who would be interested in collaborating?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's really big. That's a big question, but I think, Alex, you point out the thing that I have been thinking a lot about is that there's a skill deficit. There's not a motivation deficit. There's not an inspiration deficit. There's a skill deficit that is kind of creating the conditions in which we can't, we're not being very effective. And so that's another kind of goal of this group, is that collective learning and, a space where we can practice these skills. Because one of my personal issues has been being able to effectively communicate and advocate in a timely manner, like in the time and space when I need to stand up and speak up. There's been a long response latency. and so long a response latency, sometimes I would just never say something and just allow things to continue to happen. But that has taken work on my part, like, practicing writing out scripts for myself, practicing saying the words in a context that's like removed from the situation in which I'm going to need to use it, right? And in a safe space in the circle, where we can practice these things. And then, we can kind of go out to our respective areas, into our respective circles of influence, and share those skills, right? I envision it as that ripple effect, or that we can have an exponential impact on the world if we ourselves are very highly skilled and can model that for others.
We also had someone else ask, if show impacts with smaller groups, do you think it will be easier to get government supports or other financial supports to create even larger impacts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's like, that to me is the direction that we need to go, right? Rather than like piecemeal, like, oh, you've got this little problem, let me like insert a solution there. Like, if we have the, we have the model, like, in some, I don't know, I just have this vision, this big vision. And that's why, we need a group of people to come together and like, collectively create this vision or this plan. But like, once, my hypothesis is that once we have a model and we can, roll that out in a community, like I look at our community, we have 5,000 people that live on this island, that, kind of represent a group of people for whom there are major issues. If we were able to, in a communities like this, implement a comprehensive plan, and then have the data to show like this actually works, right? I hear all the time, it's like, oh, this is an American experiment. This is just an American experiment. Like, you don't have data, you don't have the functional controls, it's not an experiment, dude. Like, the scientist in me disagrees that there's any actual experimentation going on. It's just a bunch of people throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping something works, and like, that doesn't work for me anymore. So
It kind of goes back to one of the first statements that you made about having a pivot, right? The idea of pivoting is about trying new things. If it fails, moving on and trying something else, right? Learning from your mistakes and learning from the data that's collected. So we had some other folks with other questions. Debbie is asking, how do we coordinate these efforts, and how do we engage in discourse? How do we engage in discourse? This plays such a big part.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, being able to have conversations with people who have differing perspectives than yours, and being able to influence change is a skill in and of itself. And my personal, like, I have had to say some really hard things to some people that I love very deeply. And it was really difficult to be able to kind of like, say the things that I needed to say in a way that was like kind, caring, and compassionate, and in alignment with my values, but also clear and concise, and like no mixed messages, without crying. Like, I mean, there's just so much. And that's why, that practice component is so, so critical.
We have one last question here. Do we have an online forum where we can share ideas and experiences? We'll need to make sure that we create a culture of erring on the side of more sharing of ideas rather than less. People shouldn't be afraid of contributing too much. Very well said, Alex.
Yeah, very well said. And there's not currently a forum for that, but that is the vision. That's where I want to be that hub where, and I keep saying because like this is kind of my idea and my personal vision, but this isn't about me. This is about us and what we can do collectively. And so if, whoever wants to come in and join the pod and help kind of figure out what this is going to look like, how we can create a forum, what is the, what are we learning? What are we talking about? How are we affecting action? How are we helping people, analyze their own data, analyze kind of what's going on in their own communities? I think it has the potential to be very powerful. But it doesn't exist yet.
Right. Maybe this could be a potential dissemination project, Alex, that you can create. And if you apply to the DBA grant, you might get funded. Just saying. So thank you, everyone, for coming. It's 11 on the dot, at least PST time. And we've been here for about an hour now. Again, thank you so much for coming, chatting, vocally chatting via the chat box. These are the sort of conversations that are fun and incredible and inspirational that we try to have as often as possible within the DBA and especially within Coffee and CUs. And so I'm so grateful that all of you were able to come hang out for an hour and chat and learn something new on a Saturday morning. It's amazing. I wish you the very best for the rest of your weekend. And Abby, thank you so much for contributing an hour of your time to chat with us. This was really, really important to talk about, really inspirational, and I really hope that the attendees were able to garner something important from this.
Well, you're very welcome. I was excited to be here, and thank you all for coming and listening, and hopefully I planted the seed of inspiration and empowerment in your brain, and it can start to grow. Water it and give it vitamins.
Well said. Well, everyone, thank you. Have a great rest of your weekend. Take care.